The world is lusting after clean energy. Net carbon zero is the goal. Different countries, different goals, 2035, 2050, lots of different targets, lots of different topics being discussed. But one topic that should be at the forefront of everybody's mind is nuclear energy. And we have a guest here on the program today. It's the Uranium Insider Justin Huhn to give us an overview of what is happening in the sector right now. I looked at the uranium price actually before recording this interview, and it's stable. It hasn't moved much. It's pretty flat. And curious to hear Justin's opinions. What is happening here with the uranium price? Where's the excitement? How much of a part is it in the Inflation Reduction Act? Lots and lots of things to talk about. We'll try to squeeze everything into a short 30 minutes here. And Justin, it is great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, happy to be here. And I'll do my best to squeeze into 30 minutes.
I know there's a lot to unpack in the world of uranium, and why don't we start with a quick introduction to yourself? You named yourself the Uranium Insider. Where do the insights come from, and who are you, Justin?
It's a good question. Honestly, a lot of the insights come from not only our own work, but just the network that I've built out over the past 5+ years. So I owe a lot of my knowledge around the sector based on that network, which includes people in the investing space that have done 20,000 hours of work on nuclear, and a lot of folks within the nuclear industry as well. So my network is very, very important, and has a lot to do with the insider name of this venture. So been operating this newsletter since August of 2019. I've been focusing on this sector since about 2017. Thesis came to me in 2016. I was very interested in an extreme contrarian investment, which was a new type of investing for me at the time. The sector was absolutely bombed out. I actually heard about the investment thesis literally, I think, the month that the commodity bottomed. So it went from $134 a pound in 2007. It dropped a bit, started to recover into 2011. Then Fukushima Daiichi accident happened, and there was a downward slide for the commodity since that moment, all the way to below $18 a pound in 2016. And that's when I heard about it. Heard about the folklore and the stories of the investment returns from the previous bull market, which were astonishing. Learned a lot about how the sector actually was and is a growth sector, especially now. You actually have the WNA, the World Nuclear Association, shooting for almost a 5% growth for the industry out to 2040, based on a reference case scenario. So that's pretty significant. And the story has gone from just investing in an extreme contrarian sector that was completely bombed out, that everybody hated. Nobody had any hope for these equities, for the commodity, for the sector at all. And that was a bet on it going from just absolutely terrible to just bad. And it has done that and then some. And now bring us to today, where we've had pretty much a nuclear renaissance, especially over the past couple of years, in looking at energy crises in Europe, energy crises in Japan, and various other countries around the world. The multiple governments, in fact, most governments around the world, having some form of climate or decarbonization goals. And nuclear is finally being included in that conversation justifiably. And so we have just a lot of countries moving towards nuclear, or increasingly supporting their existing nuclear, with some exceptions. But the big countries that are very reliant on nuclear are going even bigger into nuclear. So that would be China. Has 52 gigawatts of nuclear right now. They're pushing to have 200 gigawatts by 2035. So in the next 12 years, looking to build close to 150 reactors in the next 12 years. France, that is 75% nuclear, is looking to build new reactors. The UK is looking to build new reactors. In the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act essentially is de-risking the nuclear fleet and giving clean energy production tax credits to all the existing nuclear utilities, and supporting new nuclear in the forms of advanced nuclear and SMRs. They just released a report yesterday called the Liftoff Report for nuclear, where they're pushing for an additional 200 gigawatts of nuclear by 2050. Which would mean incredible expansion of nuclear fuel cycle and mining capabilities starting before 2030. So I just have to pinch myself when I look at the news flow in this sector, because it's astonishingly positive, especially going out to the mid to long term. The short term, what's going to happen next week or next month is anybody's guess, but we're in inning one of a nuclear fuel cycle, utilities contracting cycle, I should say. And that's just kind of underpinning the thesis. And then we have the financial players, which is like the X factor. But I could talk about more of any of that. It's an exciting space. It's a feel-good investment. I'm super pumped for what's coming.
Absolutely, lots happening. As you said, like Inflation Reduction Act. Every country has their own plan to go, net carbon zero. Not even sure where to start. Maybe we'll start with the uranium price. Right, you said it was pretty much bombed to death down to $16. Now we're trading between 48 and $54. It seems like there's a bit of excitement missing still. Price ran up, but now it's flat. I looked at the chart just before we came on here, and it is range bound pretty much for the last 6-7 months maybe. Why is there no excitement in the price? Like, based on what you're saying, there should be almost exuberance in the price.
So I would say that it's a confluence of a couple of factors having to do with the range-bound spot uranium price. One of those factors is the exogenous event of Russia invading Ukraine, and Russia being a major player in the entire fuel cycle. So they're, 14-15% of U3O8 uranium production. They're about 35% of conversion, which is nuclear fuel service. And they're about 40% of enrichment of global capacity. So they're the biggest player by far in both conversion and enrichment. And so what happens when we have such a shocking event, like the war that's happening and the way that the Western utilities are on their own volition, not seeking new contracts with Russia for those services, what you have is utilities sort of stepping away from short-term action. And so the spot market is less than 12 months settlement, right? So a utility buying in the spot market is not happening all that much. It's happening a little bit right now, but over the past 6 to 12 months, it's happening less and less. And why is that? Well, the utilities tend to rely on their inventories during moments like this for just to see if it will pass, essentially, right? Because if this situation resolves itself and all of a sudden the global market sort of just reopens for utilities, then they can again gain access to that very, very low cost, reliable player, which is Russia in the nuclear fuel cycle. They've been providing conversion and enrichment services and deliveries of enriched uranium globally for pushing 30 to 40 years, and they haven't missed a single delivery, and they've been extremely low cost. So the utilities globally love working with the Russians. They've been extremely reliable. So to have that access not necessarily officially cut off, but self-sanctioning going on by the Western utilities and not engaging in new contracts, that's a big deal, an incredibly big deal for utilities. So they're still wading through that uncertainty while they are increasing the number of pounds and the number of long-term contracts. So that market is really starting to heat up. So that's one factor why the spot price isn't reacting in the same way that the other elements of the fuel cycle are. The second is that the other mover of spot uranium is the financial players and the actual financialization of the sector, in particular the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which purchased Uranium Participation Corporation. This was a physical uranium fund that was established in 2005. They purchased 18 million pounds of uranium in about 17 years, from 05 to 2002 or 2001, excuse me. I guess 16 years. When Sprott took them over in 2001, they established an ATM, so an at-the-market financing vehicle where they can actually issue trust units into the open market, raise cash, and buy uranium in real time. That went live August of 2021. And since August of 2021, they have purchased over 45 million pounds of uranium. So they're sitting on like 62, 63 million pounds of uranium inventory. They've been an absolute powerhouse, and the price has gone from the low 30s to about $50 a pound. It spiked up above 60 for a moment in time there last year. But we've had risk-off financial markets. So there hasn't been a lot of capital flowing into the sector, into the Sprott vehicle, and that's affected the buying or lack thereof in the spot market by the financial players. So those two factors have led to a somewhat stagnant spot price. However, it's pretty incredible that even with the financial players not buying in volumes that we saw, let's say August through November of 2021, and then again March and April of last year, the volumes have really dried up from the financial players, but we're still seeing a very, very stable, about $50 a pound. In my opinion, that's an extremely positive sign for the actual structural nature of the spot market.
Really, really interesting commentary there. I want to start with your point one, actually, like the extraction or the delivery from Russian uranium, more or less, because the enrichment is happening. I know just outside of St. Petersburg, I believe. Well, most of the mining is happening in Kazakhstan. I'm probably, am I correct?
Yes.
Checking myself here.
No, Kazakhstan's the biggest player. They produce on a 100% basis close to 60 million pounds a year. And the best assets that Russia has for actual uranium are joint venture mines with Kazatomprom.
Okay, so the question is, like, I wanted to get to is, like, do you see the U.S. or any other Western nation, more or less, starting to establish their own supply chain, focus on uranium refining for fuel? Do you see that being established? Because you said the players are very cautious, meaning the utilities are very cautious in entering new contracts or anything. Do you see like an alternative supply chain being established right now?
Yes, with enough time and enough capital, yes. So that hasn't yet happened. So we're still kind of in this liminal space between kind of the old way of operating, which was a fully global market where the utilities could rely on Kazakhstan as a primary source. And when I say the utilities, I'm talking about, United States is the largest fleet in the world with 93 reactors, and the EU having a massive reactor fleet as well. Both can largely rely on the big players. So that would be Kazakhstan for uranium. That'd be Russia for conversion and enrichment. Now, in the United States, we actually have a Russian suspension agreement, which limits how much uranium they can, or uranium products that the utilities can get from Russia, which is about 20% of their needs, but still a major source, right? So what's happening now is the bulk of the nuclear utilities in the world exist in the quote unquote West. So the OECD countries, it's about 70% of the global nuclear fleet is in the West, but only about 40% of the enrichment exists in the West. So what's happening right now is there's been a big uptick in demand for Western conversion and enrichment and Western U3O8 as well. So Cameco, for example, they signed 80 of the 114 million pounds under long-term contracts last year. So they're seeing a big influx of demand for uranium contracts. But we're also seeing, at least funding and intention and language coming from the U.S. Department of Energy that they want to really shore up the nuclear fuel cycle here. So to speak specifically about the United States, we mine basically zero uranium right now. That is going to change. That is going to increase. Historically, that's been different. I think that there's going to be a premium for pounds coming from the United States. But we have conversion here that is coming back online. So that's the Metropolis facility in Illinois. That'll be online any minute now. That's been in the process of restarting for the past year. So that's going to help with conversion. We don't have any enrichment. We have very little enrichment. We have an entity called Centrus, which operates centrifuges that are owned by the DOE. And Urenco has a facility in New Mexico, but that's technically owned by the British. So the United States is wanting to expand every element of the fuel cycle. We do have fuel fabrication in the United States, so that's good. But considering that it's nuclear is 20% of our electricity grid, it makes sense that we would have at least sufficient mining and fuel cycle capabilities to supply our own fleet from a national security perspective. So it looks like we're moving in that direction, and multiple other countries seem to be moving in a similar direction.
Judging based on the quality of the national U.S. grid, there seems to be a bit of a stretch that some forward thinking is happening there. But really interesting commentary. But I just quickly want to touch on the point of Kazakhstan. How safe is the supply coming out of Kazakhstan? It's one thing sending it to Russia for enrichment. The other is to send it to the U.S. directly. Is that a possibility at all, or does all of it have to go through Russia? And is all of it going through Russia?
So Kazakhstan, Kazatomprom, which is the uranium mining company in Kazakhstan, that it's partially public. It's still majority state owned, but it's partially public at this point, since 2018. I think they're doing the best job they can given the circumstances, right? So they're in a very, very tricky position. They share the largest land border in the world with Russia. They share a border with China, and they're right in the middle of China's Belt and Road, sending materials essentially through Kazakhstan to Europe. They've been doing their best to avoid actually shipping out of the port of St. Petersburg, which is where they typically ship their uranium to their global clientele. They've established a Western route that goes through the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, across multiple countries that are going through various elements of conflict. It's not the cleanest option for them. So a couple of options are, to some extent, they continue shipping through the port of St. Petersburg, but they've been voluntarily avoiding that just to try to gain, to maintain the trust and the business for Western customers, right, that are trying to avoid dealing with Russia whatsoever. You also have issues with shipping insurance. The only shipper that can ship this class of material with radioactive materials is actually a Canadian shipping company. They currently have a waiver for Russian sanctions. And that waiver comes up in a couple of months here. I think it's early July. Whether or not that will be extended, I don't know. But that's important for shipping that material to Canada, to the United States. So they've done the best they can. Honestly, most of the material coming out of Kazakhstan goes east to China. So there's some options to have swaps. So China has their own production in various places around the world. They've got not only joint ventures with Kazakhstan, but they have mining operations in Namibia. And so they hold uranium in various different conversion facilities around the world, in Canada, in the EU. And so a Western customer technically could buy from material from Kazakhstan and do a swap at a converter with the Chinese. It's not the cleanest option. It's not an option that the utilities love, but it's on the table. With all of that said, Kazakhstan has become a much more complicated jurisdiction in the past 12 months. So they're in a tricky spot. It's very difficult to say how it's going to be going forward, other than I think it's safe to say that more of the production coming from Kazakhstan is likely to stay in the East and be less available or less attractive to Western customers at this point, given what's happening over there.
No, interesting commentary, because also President Xi and Putin met yesterday as well. So curious if that was part of the conversation. The Belt and Road Initiative obviously had to be part of it, economic relationships. So really curious where that goes.
I think so. I think it's likely that China is going to be getting a lot more of what Russia and Russia's allies have to offer. Now, Kazakhstan is not going to come out and say that they're an ally of Russia, but they're also not necessarily. So they haven't pledged support of Russia with this invasion, but they also have not completely turned their backs on Russia. So for example, in January of last year, they had some internal conflict with some uprising and rioting that was happening within the country, and they essentially called on Moscow to come and quell that uprising, which they did, just like that. Russia obviously is still a big ally of them. Something that happened recently, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, some Kazatomprom and Russia joint ventures that were based in the Netherlands were moved back into Russian ownership. So that to me seems like a preemptive move. I think it's highly likely that we'll see some kind of cutting off of material, whether that's actual sanctions coming from the EU and or the US, or Russia actually cutting off, the receiving of materials coming from their joint ventures. So it's basically, there's a lot of hair on the story. Let's just say that. It's not, Kazatomprom is by far the value play in the space of the lowest cost producer. They're printing an enormous amount of cash. And that's only going to get larger as the price of uranium continues to rise, which it will. But it's a tricky jurisdiction, and I don't think it's getting any cleaner going forward, at least for the short term.
No, I fully agree. I've been to Kazakhstan recently, and I actually was quite impressed how they're trying to position themselves away from Russia, actually, because I think they voted against Russia in the UN just in the last 6 months as well. Actually, now it's almost probably 8 months since I've traveled there. So really, really interesting. I want to bring the conversation back to something you've said earlier, that there's no uranium mining in the US. Is it just a function of price, incentive? What is lacking right now? Because I know there's some operations in Wyoming, for example, but what are they struggling with? Why is the U.S. sort of not mining its own uranium?
Essentially price. So the U.S., historically speaking, had produced a lot of uranium, especially in the 1980s during the United States' big push into nuclear and building dozens and dozens of reactors during that decade. They produced a little bit going into the previous bull market, and at this point, the price had just collapsed to such an extent that it didn't make sense for any producers in the United States. So you even have in Wyoming, like you mentioned, Energy Fuels and UR Energy are two companies that are the only companies actually producing, I guess Peninsula perhaps a little bit, that produce with ISR. They've got very, very low cash costs as far as their production. In fact, their cash costs are in line with Kazakhstan's production costs, but their all-in sustaining or their fully allocated costs are much higher because their production needs a lot of capex at this point to get back up to decent levels of production. Honestly, we're probably looking at all of the companies that are near-term producers in the United States. If we look at 50 to 100 million in capex and 2, 3, 4 years down the road, maybe we'll be getting 3 to 5 million pounds of production out of the United States, and that's getting us there. But the United States fleet consumes 45 million pounds a year, and the United States will never produce that much. So it's important that we rely on some allies for that uranium production. But of course, shoring up the fuel cycle will also help, having more capacity for conversion and enrichment out into the future once that's there. But yes, essentially it's price. And so now these near-term producers, so that's Energy Fuels, that's Peninsula, Encore Energy, Uranium Energy Corporation, UR Energy, all of these companies are seeking out contracts from nuclear utilities, and most of them are getting them. They're starting to kind of trickle in. Like I said, I think the utilities, generally speaking, are going to be looking at Western pounds more and more if this conflict continues to stick, or if this bifurcated market continues to remain.
Yeah, interesting. Like you mentioned a few names that I've been following loosely for years, actually, because they started in the junior mining world and sort of moved up now to soon to be producers. They just went through that whole development cycle. One thing I've noticed whenever the price of uranium ticks up, I hear of 5 new uranium juniors, right? Realistically, how much new uranium supply do we need in the world, Justin? Not just
that's a really good
just
question.
in North America.
That's a really good question. We need a lot of uranium supply. In the short term, we don't need that much more uranium supply, even though there's a big supply deficit even this year, right? So last year, especially before McArthur River got into production, because they only produced 1 or 2 million pounds last year with their restart. That's the largest uranium mine in the world. It's in Saskatchewan, Canada, operated by Cameco and Orano. Last year, there was about 135 million pounds produced on a global basis, and there was 175 to 180 million pounds of demand. So just an absolutely huge disjunct between supply and demand for last year. Some secondary supply buffers that a little bit, so that comes primarily from enrichers underfeeding. So that enrichers, when they have a lot of excess supply, they can actually utilize less feed and sell the excess feed into the open market. And that's historically been 25 to 30 million pounds of uranium on an annual basis of secondary supply. Now, it wasn't that much last year, and it's going to be significantly less this year because the Western enrichers don't have any extra capacity. In fact, they're utilizing 100% of their capacity, and they're having to actually go into the market and buy uranium and buy UF6 in order to overfeed their centrifuges. That's a complex story we can get into, but for now, we'll leave it at that. So McArthur River at full production, getting there this year, next year for sure. Langer Heinrich, the mine in Namibia operated by Paladin, should be in full production by the end of 2024. So let's say 2025 with those 2 mines fully operational, we get closer to a almost balanced market-ish. But That's just a snapshot. And that's a moment in time snapshot. And that's not how the nuclear utilities operate. So they don't say, oh, we've got a balanced market in 2025. No, they look at their needs going out into 2030s and beyond, assuming they know that they will be in operations. That's why these restarts are big for the story, because, you know, a plant like California's Diablo Canyon that was supposed to be shutting down this year, they extended to 2030. So PG&E's got to go out and buy 5 years worth of uranium. And that's, you know, that happens with every life extension. So utilities think in decades, and they look out towards the middle of the next decade, right? So contracts being signed right now are 2027 to 2032 and beyond. So utilities look at that, look at their own needs. They don't look at what the market is balanced or not. They look at their own needs and they go out and they cover those needs. So that's really what's happening right now, because over the last 10 years, the utilities, generally speaking, have contracted way lower volume than what they consume on an annual basis. They've been able to do that because they've been able to shore up with spot market purchases. They've been able to buy underfeeding UF6 and EUP, and so avoiding that uranium contracting. But that's gone. There's no UF6 in the market. These enrichment contracts are coming in at much higher tails assays. Without getting into the weeds on that, basically means about a 20 to 25% increase in uranium feedstock demand. So we're looking at a jump up, you know, probably north of 200 million pounds of actual uranium demand starting potentially next year, 2025, 2026. So the demand is off the charts. So how much uranium production do we need? Let's just say that according to our own modeling, every single development project that we expect will get into production this decade, if it does actually happen on time and on budget, we're still hundreds of millions of pounds short of production by the end of the decade. So we need all of it. We need all of it. We need a lot. We need, there's, I mean,
how many
if we don't have robust,
jump in there, Justin, like how many projects are actually like development ready or close to being like even that stage, let's call it feasibility stage in mining, like to get to that construction decision point? Like how many are actually close enough in the next few years, or let's say by the end of this decade? That's only 6.5 years away.
Well, they will all tell you that they're close, right? They'll all tell you that they're production ready. But in reality, we have, let's see what's on the table for the next 5 years. Realistically, we've got Global Atomic's DASA project in Niger. They're actually building that mine right now. They're looking for 2025 production. Care and maintenance mines, we have, like I mentioned, Cameco's McArthur River's in the process of restart. They should get close to near full production this year. Definitely next year. That's 18 million pounds of uranium per year. We have Paladin's Langer Heinrich that they've also announced a restart. That's looking at late 2024, early 2025 for production there. But as far as greenfield, we have, like I said, a handful of smaller producers in the United States that can come online within that time frame. You know, if all of them get into production, maybe we'll see 5 million pounds in the next 5 years per year. Let's see. Orano is looking at their Imaurin project in Niger as well. They shuttered that in 2015 due to low prices. They're trying to get ISR running up there. They said hopefully they'll be producing by 2028 from there. Kazakhstan has got more deposits they're developing there. There's some production maybe coming out of Mongolia towards the end of the decade. There's like NextGen's Arrow, which is an absolutely massive deposit, very, very high grade. They could produce up to 30 million pounds a year. I don't think that's online in the next 5 years, but hopefully that will be online by the end of the decade. I don't know who's going to be operating that, but we'll see how that goes. So that's pretty much what we have. It's really not a very rosy picture for demand. The Uzbeks are looking to possibly double their production by the end of the decade. That would be another 8 or 9 million pounds per year. But even if all of that happens and then some, we're still far, far short of structural demand coming on an annual basis by the time we get out to 2030. So then you've got a lot of low grade projects in the United States, in Namibia, that need $80 to $100 a pound and multiple hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in capex. So we're not betting on those being online in the next 5 years.
Well, Justin, since you're the uranium, I have to ask you, like, I hear Sweden is about to lift its moratorium. That word. their ban on uranium mining, extraction, exploration as well. Is that going to have an impact? Like, are we looking at some significant numbers coming to market at some point there as well? Or is that just news for now?
For now, it's just news. Yeah, it takes a very, very, very long time to get uranium deposits into development. And so I'm not holding my breath on that one. Honestly, when I hear stories like this, my initial reaction is that's great. That's great. I hope that it happens because we're going to need that uranium. But that's probably many, many years away from happening. Generally speaking, the grades are very low in Sweden. So that means high cost. So it's unlikely, even if they lift that moratorium, we're going to see any pounds come out of Sweden probably this decade. I would be very surprised if it happens this decade.
Fantastic. Interesting. Yeah, interesting commentary. I actually own a stock that might benefit from that. So I'm curious. Like, I'm just trying to get some more context. I haven't had too much time looking into that. So that's why I figured I'd ask you, the Uranium Insider.
Sure. No, I mean, it looks hopeful, but this investment cycle, we're probably looking at a 5 to 8 year contracting cycle. But we very well could see price spikes in the meantime. So, this investment, we could see a price spike in the next couple of years. But we very well will be, out of this investment potentially by the time some of these projects like that even come online. So it absolutely will not affect this contracting cycle or the price trajectory.
No, it's too near term. Absolutely. No, it needs a bit of development. Absolutely. I get that. Justin, I think we got the point across that you are the Uranium Insider. You know your stuff about uranium. I tremendously appreciate the insights of the conversation. We'll definitely have to do a follow-up maybe in 6 months, see where the market is at. Because I think, as you said before we hit record, things are changing actually quite quickly. Sentiment towards uranium and nuclear energy is changing everywhere. Which is actually I'm really happy to see. So curious to see where it goes. Where can we find more of you? Obviously, Uranium Insider is just above you.com, but I think you have quite an active Twitter account as well.
Yeah, it's become less active lately, just because people tend to get kind of nasty when the markets turn down. But it's part of the cycle. Resource bull markets are incredibly volatile. There will be a line of bodies left behind with this investment because it shakes 90% of the retail investors out every time it pulls back. But I am pretty active on Twitter. I try to maintain some sort of presence there, try to maintain some positivity. Of course, it swings from despondent sentiment to euphoric sentiment sometimes like that. So very emotional creatures in this investment. So buyer beware if you're heading into the Twitter space to look for myself or anyone else talking about uranium. But it's a great community. Honestly, it really is. It's a great community on Twitter. Uranium Twitter is super fun. So at Uranium Insider on Twitter, and then of course uraniuminsider.com, and we do our best to communicate with people when they reach out with any questions or any interested parties about our service or just about the thesis in general.
Fantastic. You also run a podcast with my good friend Trevor Hall. What's the name of it? Remind me of it.
Yeah, that's called Going Nuclear. That's on Trevor's the new Clear Commodities Network. We just started that. Just started that in January. We'll be doing the 3rd episode this month. Trevor's a good friend, and very excited about that podcast as well. And I also do my own Uranium Market Minute podcast. I took a bit of a hiatus, but I'm kind of back on that now. And we do monthly webinars for our members that they go like 2 hours long, and we bring a industry contact on as a guest for those. So those are really, really great and informative. But yeah, plenty busy with the various forms of media.
I can imagine. Just always running a Twitter account itself, like just full-time job itself, right?
It can be.
Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for your patience with me here as well. We're on the mobile setup, so I do appreciate that. I had a couple technical issues here at the beginning, and as you've seen, but I think we've ironed them out during the conversation. So, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We tremendously appreciate you watching our videos and our content. We hope it is insightful. I'm frozen again. Doesn't matter. I have a pretty face. I'll put another photo in there as well. But appreciate you watching us. I know 90% of you are not subscribed. It's that square box here at the bottom on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments as well. Justin and I will be taking a look at them as well. So let us know, and we'll be back with lots more content. Thank you so much for tuning in.